Stand up. Be recognized. Say hello. Thank you for coming. I want to get right into this conversation. Thank you all so much for being a part of it. Um, Mayor Bottoms, you saw this film, I believe, right before you were sworn in as mayor. Private screening for the future mayor of Atlanta. Can you take me through just your emotion watching the film then and now?
I'm so embarrassed and I'm so emotional today. I did see it maybe about a week or so before I was sworn in, and it was like seeing it for the first time today. And it's 7 months in, and so many things resonated. But I just want to say to Buzzy and Wendy, you all did an incredible job. And there were so many things that resonated with me today that I couldn't anticipate even in December. But it was almost insert headline, change date. So many things have changed, but so many things are the same. Even when you think about our election and you think about the map and the way that our city really was torn racially, and every single vote in our last election, almost 95,000 votes cast, 832 vote difference. You can just about break it down by precincts, white and black precincts in the city. And so it is, I'm a mom of four, so watching Buzzy and Brooke and the family and those challenges, so many things resonated in a way today that just struck me in a very different and powerful way today.
What similarities did you see between your runoff election in December and what we saw in the film with Maynard's race against Sam Massell? Is it too late to say congratulations to the mayor of Atlanta for winning that?
It really it gives me chills watching this, and I'm reading the biography right now as well. If you've not read that, you should, by Bob Holmes. And there were so many similarities. There were many candidates to begin with, but we ended up in a runoff. There was a white candidate, and of course me, but also just even down to not being the chosen one and not being the one with the coordination to be mayor. And it really was about going to the people and in many ways bucking the traditional power anointers and saying, I'm still going to do this. We are still going to do this. And it's thus what saith the Lord and the people of Atlanta. And so much of that, even in knocking on doors, having people say, you're doing this the Maynard Jackson way. There was no prouder moment than going directly to the people and having the people speak their voice and speak their piece about who the mayor of Atlanta should be. But I think the thing that resonates with me most about our election is how much people across the country cared about Atlanta. And looking at the documentary, it makes sense to me. I was born and raised in Atlanta, so it's a little difficult sometimes to conceptualize what Atlanta means to the country. But people cared, and it made a difference.
Mr. Jordan, I wanted to ask you about the Maynard that you knew. And can you take us back to 1968? That was, we were celebrating the 50-year anniversary of so many events that happened that year. What compelled him to run for Senate in such a trying year? And how did this movie shape your perspective of the man that you knew?
Well, first of all, it's a great movie. And it's a movie that all of us, especially in our community, should see it in the same way that we read Up From Slavery and Souls of Black Folk. It's essential that we see it. So as I sat watching the movie, I thought about Maynard and me at David T. Howard High School in 1951. when we both played in the David D. Howard High School band. And Senator Richard Russell of Georgia announced that he was going to seek the Democratic nomination for president. And there was to be a parade down Peachtree Street. And Richard Russell will go up Peachtree Street on his way to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, he thought. And so Ira Jarrell, who was the superintendent of the Atlanta Public Schools, called Mr. Gideons, our principal, who told Mr. Days, our bandmaster, that she wanted the David D. Howard Band to be at Peachtree and Baker Streets on a day certain in October to play for Richard Russell. Mr. Days told us that in band practice, and a trombone player named Maynard Jackson and a trumpet player named Vernon Jordan said, "Hell no, we won't go." And a big discussion took place. And to show the future of his political wisdom and practical approach to problems, Maynard stood up, followed by me, and said, "If we don't go, our principal and our bandmaster will lose their jobs." So with hand-me-down instruments from Grady High School, we played for Richard Russell at Peachtree and Baker Street. But the real lesson is that 21 years later, Maynard was conducting the Political Symphony of Atlanta when he was sworn in as mayor.
What do you see as the most relevant part of his legacy today, and what especially do you want young people, our generations, to remember about him and you've got a young leader right next to you who might want to listen to that answer as well.
Well, if you want it bad enough, you have to go get it.
It seems like the part of the film that got the most sort of reaction out of the audience was the times where he just really had this audacity to just take things by the reins and to make those decisions. How did you, in sort of telling that part of the story, what was your goal there, Wendy?
Yeah. Maynard, I learned a new word in doing this documentary when he said White Fowler had the absolute temerity to end up polarizing this city. Maynard did not mind pushing every button because at the end of the day, it was about equality. He was a race man, and he wanted to make sure that there was inclusion for everyone. And one of the things that we found, we went as far back, Bunny Jackson Ransom had saved articles from 1964 to 2003. We have a bigger collection than the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I mean, papers, sepia papers. So thank you. By the way, she's the wind beneath our wings on this entire project. But that was very much so like Maynard, and that's why I've known Mayor Bottoms most of our life. And there is a direct correlation between willing to stand for what is right, because it's the right thing to do, even in the face of people that tell you you can't do it. And that was truly the bottom line.
Yeah, I just want to tell you something. You can't, if you're as old as I am and been around as long as I've been around, you can't look at that movie about Maynard and not think about his grandfather, John Wesley Dobbs.
That's right.
John Wesley Dobbs and A.T. Walden ran the Atlanta Negro Voters League. One was a Republican, one was a Democrat. And Maynard and I, at the Butler Street YMCA, would go next door to A.T. Walden's office to fold the letters of the Atlanta Negro Voters League being sent all over the community telling us how to vote. And when it came to speech making, John Wesley Dobbs was as good as any orator in the history of this country, and Maynard got that from his grandfather. He was absolutely terrific. He didn't stop, and he never had a note.
That's right. What did you learn about your father in the process of making this film?
I learned that well, there's a unique irony kind of relating to what Mr. Jordan just said, that you have to go get it if you want it bad enough. And, you learn that from what my sister said, that my dad wasn't too keen on me just going out and going after being a drummer. And so I totally rebelled from his point of view and turned all the way left. And, kind of took on this bohemian lifestyle and just went head into to that. So by that token, I just got that naturally, just by osmosis, by going, to go for what I wanted. So I learned that I'm a lot like my father, and to understand my father, like Mr. Jordan said, you have to understand Maynard Jackson Sr., his father. You have to understand John Wesley Dobbs, and that whole line. He was expected to do what he did in some kind of manner. He was expected to stand up for our people. But to get more back to your question, I learned that I'm going to do what I want, and and but that being said, I have to, you have to curve your own will, so to speak, and think of everyone else. So, and I think that's why. So, I had always thought, this is a great idea I had. Wow, I'm super having this great idea, because I woke up with the idea of doing this documentary, but I really think Dad was up there. He kind of dropped it in, but because the irony of it all, these songs that you heard throughout, these segmented pieces throughout the different segments, right? Where I was on the drums, and I tapped some local musicians. I tapped local producers. We have our director, Sam Pollard, came with his New York crew. There's Hey Daphne. And so we just kind of had coalesced this organically, this crew. And back to the music part, because I keep
I want to ask you about the way that this film was scored as a musician.
Right.
What was your input, and how did you?
Right. So I had a point, and I'll get to it. I'm the grandson of a Baptist preacher, so bear with me. So, the irony there is that I've been able to pursue my music while telling my father's story, so that's dear to my heart. I think I learned from my father a way to make it happen. Just come up with another solution.
There is there was an aspect, you can't tell everything in the movie. Maynard was really very smart in terms of preparing the leadership of Atlanta in the black community for what he was about to do. He went to see everybody privately, personally, to say, I'm going to run for the Senate. And then I'm going to run for vice mayor, and I'm going to run for mayor. And
You told everybody but my mom. I just had to throw that out there.
I can't
Sorry.
speak to that.
Sorry. Take this mic from me.
My point is that he had sufficient respect, although maybe disagreement, that he would go and say, because of your leadership, that you have a right to know what I'm going to do, and I will need your help. He was pragmatic about that, and ultimately, it was very helpful to his leadership.
Yeah, can you comment on that?
I was born in 1970, and so Maynard Jackson is the first mayor that I remember. And I think the beauty of that is growing up in Atlanta, growing up with nothing but African-American leadership, it never occurred to me that I couldn't be mayor of Atlanta. And then what struck me in watching the movie and in reading the book is just how intentional he was about all decisions. So Atlanta is not an accident. And we just didn't wake up one day and we had Wakanda. I mean, there were very intentional decisions, very difficult decisions at every step of the way. And when you think about the timing of those decisions, it really didn't make sense. It had never been done. And here we are in 2018, and Atlanta is still in so many ways just the mecca for African Americans, not only in government, but also in business as well. And it's all due to Maynard Jackson, I believe.
I want to ask you about your vision for Atlanta. What do you see as that vision, and how do you sort of use the film as a reference point about, advancing that vision for the city?
We've created a vision, and it's very simply put, it's one Atlanta. And there are 6 pillars to this vision, but it includes a city that's not only viable economically, but also a city that really in every single way has an opportunity for all. And we, again, had to be very intentional about that. Atlanta is home to the most Fortune 500 companies in the world, but how you mirror that with what the needs are of our community. When you have the CEO of Delta Airlines and UPS and SunTrust and name 20 more names at the table, then you also ask them to work with you on education initiatives and vocational training initiatives so people in our communities can go make the $185,000 a year jobs that the linemen at Georgia Power are making, so that they can fill the airport mechanic jobs that Delta has coming down the pipeline. And so it is really, in so many ways, it's like Ambassador Young often says, it is the Atlanta way. We have this social contract and this political contract that we sit down at the table with the business community. And I know that Delta Airlines was a major sponsor even of this documentary, and everybody brings their resources to the table, and it works out for our city as a whole.
That's right. Mr. Jordan, had he been elected to the Senate, how do you think he would have tried to transform Washington or transform Congress, knowing the town the way that you do?
Had he been elected to the Senate, he would have performed in the same way he performed as a mayor. The difference is that when you're a mayor, you can make decisions. When you're in the Senate, you just vote. But when you're a mayor, you are the leader. You're in charge. You can say to the banks, if you don't put somebody on the board, I'm going to put the money in another bank. It's hard to do that when you're in the Senate or by yourself. So there's no executive power. It's just a legislative vote.
Who's got a question out there? Go ahead.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, so from Birmingham News in Birmingham, Alabama. So we have a new mayor, Randall Woodfin, and Birmingham's kind of coming into its own. But at one point in time, Atlanta and Birmingham were kind of on similar playing fields in terms of like the city's size and everything. So how do you think that, Atlanta became this city too busy to hate, and Birmingham just kind of stayed Birmingham until recently?
I think that it really is about, again, intentionality. There were decisions that were made in Atlanta that changed the trajectory of our city. One major decision was what Maynard Jackson did with the airport. That changed the course of our city. And also, again, whereas Birmingham, and Birmingham's a great city, but Birmingham really slept in so many ways when Atlanta got up and moved and evolved, even post-civil rights. So obviously we can't ignore the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Atlanta, but because I have Vernon Jordan sitting next to me, I think that he can probably articulate much better the difference between Atlanta and Birmingham and what decisions came to bear to make Atlanta the place it is today.
Thank you, Mayor. You can do it better than I can.
What's the next step for the film?
Currently, we are on digital HD, so that's iTunes and Google Play and Amazon. And so it's on all of those platforms. I won't give up a big secret, but we do have major national distribution that you'll hear about, not until September 2nd.
I mean, we're all
But-
family here. No?
You know what? Let me say this. We need your support. Every film, specifically Black films, we need your support. And there are a lot of you that are in places of influence. We're doing an educational curriculum that will accompany this film. It's been seeded by Georgia Pacific First and the Candida Fund. But if you're coming from all across the country, consider donating to help us make this curriculum. One of the things that Georgia State University wants to do is to create the Maynard Jackson Institute for Executive Change. Okay? And so civics has been taken a lot out of our classrooms. If you ask the average 12-year-old the difference between a senator and a House of Representatives, they really don't know. Okay, so one of the things that we want to do is have a K through 12 curriculum, as well as on especially the HBCUs, really make sure that we're teaching critical analysis, leadership, salesmanship, those things that Maynard, and ethics. Ethics is huge. But in taking parts of Maynard Jackson's life, so if you'd like to buy 5,000 DVDs and donate them to your city library, that's what we want. We want everyone in America and abroad. We're very grateful for the Democratic National Convention to be take abroad. There's 2 million Americans living in Europe, and they're bringing this to Paris and London and Berlin before the midterm elections. So everyone can vote. So that's really what's next for the documentary. It's just major distribution. Keep the conversation. Make sure that your children, especially those that are no longer in your state, we want them voting every single opportunity, absentee voting. Make sure that they research their candidates, because we're living at the precipice of a lot of change if we don't get back to the polls. And that's what the driving force of this documentary we want to make sure continues to happen.
Right. Real quick.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this documentary is to honor my father, of course, but also to illuminate his principles that he stood on. And one thing he wanted us all to do is vote and get other people out to vote. You mentioned folding the envelopes for the Atlanta Negro Voters League. My father had started the American Voters League. When he passed, he was basically the engine behind it, so it kind of just did nothing. I've reignited that, and it's a 501c3. So I can't tell you who to vote for, but you could probably guess. Let's say I don't like orange. I'll just say that, right? Okay. But anyway, I digress from my point a little bit. You know, so I really wanted to honor him by you know, keeping his vision going. And you know, everybody knows that my dad was into diversity. He wanted to see our people prosper, all people prosper, but with a special, keen concentration on our people, you know. And because, you know, he was always quick to point out that we were the only people that were enslaved in some kind of particular way. I don't know. Trying to compare us with black people with Jews, with Jewish people, but the only people that survived the passage, the main passage, right. And so, you know, I just want, you know, so doing this, we raised our money the old-fashioned way, you know. We didn't, you know, we started out with a Kickstarter, and we earned about $16,000 through grassroots efforts, and that got us going in development. But then we started approaching the corporate, you know, corporations, and corporate dollars started coming in once Delta stepped up and Coke, and then it kind of had a snowball effect. So we've actually started a method of raising money. But to kind of cut to the chase a little bit, we didn't really raise enough to cover the marketing. Educational. Well, yeah, education as well. But I'm talking about, you know what? Literally, our marketing is from my phone. Yeah, like I Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. She's helping me now, but she does so much. I try not to heap that on her plate. But so if you could go to your phone, follow. We're at Maynard Movie. That's on all of those I just mentioned. Carl, there's another one of my family members just made it. Carl Carter, stand up, cuz. He's another producer on the film. But so I just remembered a point I wanted to make. So Georgia, right? I don't use notes, and sorry, Dad, I just don't want to do that.
Real quick, we're wrapping.
So the Georgia film industry, as we know, is blossoming and booming. It's like a $9 billion industry now. Yet African Americans represent 1% of that industry. So I wanted to use, you know, I'm not a mayor, I'm not a politician, but I did feel like I could use this as a platform to stand up and speak on these issues. Yeah. So,
well, you guys did a great job.
Yeah.
You got, ladies and gentlemen, Maynard Jackson III, Wendy Jackson, the Honorable Keisha Lance Bottoms, and Mr. Vernon Jordan. Thank you guys for coming.
Before you leave, it's very important. This is our last film festival, and I know that we're out of time, but I have to publicly thank my entire production team, all of the producers that are here, Daphne McWilliams, Dolly Turner, Carl Carter, Winsome Sinclair, Donald Jorman, Jason Orr, and I've shared with you Bunny Jackson Ransom. Thank you, Delta Airlines. I will tell you, this is a new model for doing films. Ambassador Andrew Young said there had to be a first. It was not easy. A lot of people didn't believe that we could do it, but thank you to every single one of you that gave to make this film happen and continue the conversation of why Maynard. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, folks. Could you please, if you're staying for Greenleaf, you're welcome to stay.